Good morning, everyone. My
Right.
name is Krista Ross. I'm CEO at the Fredericton Chamber. We're delighted to welcome you this morning to our call. Minister Melanie Joly will be joining us in just a few moments. We're anticipating she'll join the call around 10:40 p.m. So I wanted to take a couple of minutes before she joins us just to give you a little bit of an update on some of the things the Chamber's been working on. As you probably know, here at the Fredericton Chamber, our team has been sending out messages to our members every day since March 13th, letting you know what's happening federally, provincially, municipally, with services and programs that will help you navigate these difficult times. So I want to give a shout out to the team that I work with at Team Chamber here in Fredericton for doing a great job. Our board and executive have been very involved in helping guide our work, and many of the board and executive are on our call today, so we thank them for their volunteer efforts at a time when their businesses need their focus. They're still contributing and volunteering in the community by helping the Chamber. In addition to communicating information out to our members, we've been working hard to let people know whether you're able to be open, operational, and offering help. So on our website, you'll see that we have a listing of, it's getting close to 300 members now and non-members who are putting information on there that talks about what it is they're able to do at this time, whether they're able to be open for curbside delivery, or perhaps it's professional services that can be done in a remote manner. So we encourage you to have a look at that list and learn about what our members can be doing. And in addition to that, if you are able to work in some capacity and provide services to your clientele, please feel free to join that list, which we're sharing, and we invite you to share it as well. On top of that, we're also doing webinars and workshops. We've done a number of those over the last few weeks. In fact, we had one earlier this morning with Simplicity Designs on guiding your business through a time of crisis, and that webinar will be posted later today. The one we're having next will be tomorrow at 10 a.m. and that is with Beauceron Security, and it's cybersecurity during COVID-19, and that's an important message and important information that your business will need to be aware of during these times. It's talking to us about working remotely and how we can make sure that how we're doing things is a safe way, and how we can individually and collectively protect our personal data, our business data, and our organizations from data breaches, privacy incidents, and cyber criminals. So that's going to be a good one. And of course, we are still doing networking because that's what our members like to have from us in addition to information. So next Thursday, we'll have a networking session. It will be done via Zoom, obviously. And we are going to have different rooms that you can enter and do networking on different topics. So we're adapting to what's happening these days in the same way that you are. Looking to see if the minister has joined us yet, and I don't think so. So I'm going to keep talking a little bit more. I'd like to say welcome to Jenica Atwin. Our MP is joining our call today, and we thank you for that. I know we have also a number of chambers from across the province. I think I mentioned Sherry Somerville is with us, the CEO of the Atlantic Chamber. Our president, Karen Grant, is with us today. And I don't see her, but I can only see one screen full of people, and I see there are 3 screens full of people. At this time, Minister Joly has joined the call. We are absolutely delighted to have her with us. She's the Minister of Economic Development, Minister of Official Languages, and she's also the minister responsible for ACOA. I've had the pleasure of joining a couple of calls with her in the last couple of weeks, and also a phone call with her. And I know that she's very concerned about our members and about small businesses from coast to coast to coast. And without further ado, I'm going to invite her to speak to us, and then we are going to go to questions that have been submitted from our members, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much, Minister Joly, and welcome.
Thank you, Krista. It's great to see you. Thank you to all of you that are watching. It will be a pleasure for me to take your questions and provide answers. I know I'm joined also by René Arsenault, who's my parliamentary secretary from New Brunswick. He's on the line, and Janika also, who's the local MP. So thank you both for being on this call. Krista, I thought talking about what's the reading of the federal government of this crisis, and talk about our three main priorities, go into the economic measures, and then take questions. Is that fine? Perfect, good. So obviously the first priority for the federal government is to make sure that we can flatten the curve. We need to stop the spread of the virus, and the only way to do that is really to make sure that we follow our public health authorities' advice. And therefore, by doing that, this is our biggest economic measure, because we'll be able to get out of this while making sure that it's not taking as much time as it would if things were out of hand. And then following that, in order for people to really follow the advice, well, they shouldn't be stressed or anxious because they can't pay rent or can't pay their mortgages or put food on the table. So that's why we decided to come up with CERB, the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, which is essentially an expansion of EI. You know, if you put yourself in the shoes of the federal government right now, well, obviously we didn't have time to create new programs. Things are moving fast, we need to adapt quickly, and all our public service is teleworking like all of us. And so that's why we decided to expand the definition of EI to people that were self-employed, or people that didn't have enough hours under the EI system but had been laid off. People also, parents that would need to stay at home because kids are out of school and they are at home, or people that would be sick with COVID-19 or taking care of people that are sick. So based on all of that, we now have a Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, which is essentially $2,000 per month, taxable. And Krista, if you have any questions about that, I can go into the details. We also decided to increase the GST tax credit. So some of you may have received checks recently or bank transfer. We also increased the Canada's Child Benefit by $300 by children. And we've done many things for also seniors and students. So these are the things we've done to expand massively the social safety net. And so that was our second priority. And our third priority was the economic package, really to help business owners to keep their employees and really be able to go through this really, really important crisis. So at the beginning, our reading was really that there would be a movement in the demand of products and services, while the supply would still, be there. So what I mean by that is, for example, if you're a business that sells furniture, well, maybe for 2 or 3 months you wouldn't be selling or reducing. You would be reducing your sales in terms of selling furniture, but at the same time, and your inventory would be pretty much the same. And so what we needed to do as a federal government was really help you mend the gap and help with the liquidity crunch that you would be facing as a business owner. And so everything we were doing was based on helping businesses face the issue of of liquidity. And so that's why Bank of Canada decided to lower its key indicator. And also, we changed some regulations to make sure that we would deploy $300 billion in new liquidity through our banking system. Now, based on that, we negotiated with banks, and banks told us that they would be more flexible. They would take a bit more risks because the federal government were taking risks for them and putting that on our shoulders. And they would reduce interest rates or make sure there would be payments made, longer in time. But Krista, my question to you and to your members is that happening in Fredericton? Are you seeing it in the local, branch of a given bank or a credit union? So that's my question to you, because if that's not the case, I want to know. We want to know, and it would be great to have feedback about that. I'm hearing different types of stories. Sometimes it's going well, sometimes it's not, and so and it depends per bank and per branch. So that was for the liquidity issue, and also we made sure to do some tax payment deferrals in time. And then as the crisis was really having much more an impact, well, we decided to go further in terms of our different economic measures, and we went from going into supporting liquidities to eventually supporting wages and going way more into subsidies. And that's why we came up with the 75% wage subsidy for businesses. And you need to show that you've incurred 30% of losses. Of course, I'll be able to answer questions regarding how this wage subsidy system is working, and I'm convinced I'll have questions about that. And eventually also what we did was to provide loans for small and medium-sized businesses, SMEs, up to $40,000 that would be, guaranteed by the Government of Canada. So business owners wouldn't have to provide any guarantees, particularly personal guarantees. And if that amount of loan of $40,000 is reimbursed over 2 years, well, then you can keep $10,000, so it becomes a $10,000 subsidy. So, and we also made sure that all the GST payments and other custom duties would be their payment would be deferred in time. So that's essentially what we've done as a federal government. Now, I know there must be questions of how this applies to your business. So let's take them and let's have a conversation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, and we appreciate, again, your time with us today. We had so many questions submitted to us in advance. I'm going to try to get through them quickly. We grouped them together. If several people asked the same question, we simply grouped it. So I'll start with last week, Prime Minister Trudeau announced employees would be able to work 10 hours per week and still be eligible to receive the CERB. When can we expect details of that change, because we haven't received any as of yet?
Yeah, so the Prime Minister announced that indeed, Krista, but there hasn't been regulatory changes made yet. So once that's done, we'll make sure that we inform you and inform your members. And so that's my first point. Second point, I know, guys, things are moving fast and the information is really, we're overflowed with information, but good information is difficult to find. So I really encourage you to follow the Canadian Business Residents Network, cbrn.ca website. I think, Krista, it's worth it that you can share it also with your members. It's a partnership between the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and the federal government. So all the information that is up to date will be on that website, so that will be helpful.
Mm-hmm. We've actually been sharing that link every day in our updates that we're sending out to our members, so they are probably already having a look at that, so I appreciate that. Second question, I guess it relates to the first one. Can an employee leave their employment voluntarily and still be eligible to receive the CERB? And I guess maybe along with that, if an employee has been laid off approved for CERB, but now they want to go back to work, or their employer wants them to go back to work. Is the employee required to accept their employment, or are they able to continue on the CERB? And how can we manage that relationship when the employer wants to reopen, but the employee does not want to come back?
Okay, so first thing, if an employee decides voluntarily to go on CERB, well, he doesn't have access to CERB. So you have to be laid off. That's the first condition. Second, if that person has been laid off, is on CERB, the employer wants to use the wage subsidy and rehire, well, that employee is not obliged by law to accept the offer. Now, let's all remember that CERB is limited in time. It's for 4 months. And when the 4 months will be done, there will be no CERB. And so, I've heard from many employers that they've been having issues in terms of recruitment, but at the same time, the reality is that the pandemic will stop at one point. And I think what people will want is to know that they have a job, and that they won't be as anxious when thinking about the future and how they'll be able to earn a living. So I know some provinces have stepped up also to help to basically make sure that some jobs are more attractive than others by increasing a bit their support to these types of jobs, particularly in terms of public service types of jobs and in long-term care facilities. So if New Brunswick would want to do that to show the competitiveness of these types of employment, well, that would be, I think, well received. Last point, Krista, it's if you decide to rehire, well, what the federal government will be doing is reimbursing you the CPP fees and also the EI fees, because when you let go somebody, you have to pay these fees, and then if you hire back, we just wanted to make sure that it would be costing $0 to business owners to rehire. So that's why that's also an incentive to rehire people, because at the end of the day, we want businesses to use the wage subsidy, and we want to make sure that people are employed rather than on CRB.
The $50,000 salary threshold to access the Canada Emergency Business Account, the CEBA, the $40,000, means that a lot of our smallest and most vulnerable businesses can't access the support. What are we doing to make the CEBA more accessible or more available to those small businesses?
Yes, I've heard that a lot. I was talking with folks in Moncton yesterday through the Chamber of Commerce, and some of them have also mentioned that to me. We're looking at ways. Obviously, there's the Communities Futures program that is extremely important, and that can help many of the small businesses. There hasn't been an increase yet to the Communities Futures program, but that could be something we don't know yet. And when we'll have more to say, you will be the first informed. But meanwhile, we're very much aware that there's an issue, and we're looking at different ways to help out. I know also some provinces have stepped up, and we hope that New Brunswick can do something about it as well.
Some business owners have suggested they'd like to use money from their own RRSPs to support their business through this time of recovery rather than borrow. But the penalties for withdrawing from their RRSPs are very prohibitive. Has there been thought given to allowing business owners to withdraw without penalty and some type of a repayment timeline in place?
Yes, this was first brought up to me yesterday. I think because people are going through the liquidity crunch and really trying to find ways to make sure to survive, quite frankly. And so this is something that I'll bring up to the Minister of Finance, because I think it's worth a conversation. We had already done something for, pensioners, retirees, to make sure that as they, they have to take out 25%
From the risk.
usually, yeah, they have to withdraw 25% per year, and we decided to lower that. But at the end of the day, it's not answering your question regarding the RSP aspect of business owners. So this is something we can look into. But quite frankly, if we're able to use the CEBA or CERB or the wage subsidy and expand the criteria, I think it would help a lot of people.
We've heard from a lot of startup businesses that were in the middle of financing negotiations with lending institutions, with government institutions, and they're telling us that lending institutions have tightened up the requirements due to the liquidity restraints and market uncertainty, and that startups are now placed in a much higher risk category, and they're at the bottom of the list for financing. What would your comment be on that?
So at first, startups didn't fall into the wage subsidy because they weren't able always to show the 30% of loss. And what we've done is for two things. First, for businesses that have been created since February of 2019, so that's a year and a couple of months ago, it will be a case-by-case basis to have access to the wage subsidy. Second, also, you can show that if you're a startup that is a bit older than February 2019, but you've been growing at a fast pace, or even if you're, pre-revenues, well, you can show that you've incurred a 30% loss since the beginning of the year by using January and February as a benchmark. And then basically be able to show that 30% loss. Now, that's kind of a tweak we've done to the wage subsidy. But I know also that many incubators across the country are asking for more funding to help many startups. ACOA always supports many incubators. We haven't received yet an increase in the budget of ACOA. If that's the case, obviously, this is something we would be definitely looking at.
Yes, I think this question was not just geared towards the wage subsidy piece, but just lending in general.
Yeah, and so that's why incubators actually do that a lot.
Okay.
And so that would be a way.
And impact loan grants and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The next question that we received is kind of specific to one of our member businesses. But I think it's a very common issue. And so I'm going to read it. It's with respect to CEBA, this is our scenario. We have a legal business entity whose payroll is more than $1 million, but less than 1.5. However, the legal entity has two profit centers, a full service restaurant and a hotel. They both have a payroll under $1 million. The reason for having both is for operational effectiveness and efficiency in one legal entity. However, for WorkSafe, for example, they're treated separately because they're two different industry codes and have different rates. Would each of these profit centers qualify for the CEBA loans? And if so, how can they maneuver to the application website? The restaurant is shut down as per provincial emergency orders. The hotel business is down between 95 and 98%. So how would two businesses operating as one legally, but two separate entities, how do they manage that?
So I know I'm a lawyer and former entrepreneur, but I won't give this don't take this as a legal advice, but I think it's a good conversation to have with your lawyer, because obviously when you decided to do this corporate, how can I say, corporate organization, you had in mind different advantages. Now I think at this point it is important that you have access to different measures, and there may be some work to be done on the corporate side, the corporate legal side. And so I won't give you my advice directly, but on this particular subject. But I've seen that in other, particularly hotels do that. Well, they have a restaurant inside the hotel and they divide their corporate structure. But it is important that you talk with your accountant and with your lawyer about it.
So if I'm understanding correctly, then they would be eligible to both apply separately?
Well, if there's a corporate reorganization, maybe, I don't want to, this is too of a specific question, Krista, to go into the weeds.
Okay,
Uh,
well, we'll leave that one for now, and maybe
and I
reach
think,
out to your
I,
department for specifics.
yeah, well, not only that, tax experts will talk with the CRA
Mhm.
and they'll get the best advice from the CRA, and then, they'll do things according to law. Um, and I don't know what that reorganization would have an impact on other things within the business. At
Mhm.
the end of the day, the idea for SIBA is to be interpreted, largely, in the sense that in order for people to have access to it.
Mhm.
The idea is certainly not to have a restrictive approach when it comes to how it applies.
Okay.
So that's my point.
We have had a couple of questions with regards to the BCAP loan applications through BDC and EDC. And we've been told by some of our members that they've inquired with regards to those loans, and that BDC wasn't quite ready to accept applications yet because they did not have all the information from government as of yet. Do you have a sense of when that application process would be available?
We'll take that information down. My team is also on the line, so we can follow up with you, Krista. Meanwhile, if you have funding through ACOA, what we've done is that we've made things more flexible. Our interest-free loans, we've given you at least 3 months to pay them back. And also there's more flexibility within ACOA. So it's worth it that you talk with your ACOA folks if you fall into the cracks and the BDC is not necessarily there to help. So, and while you're facing a real cash crunch right now.
Mhm. One of the questions that was sent in is this one's quite forward thinking. In the economic recovery after this crisis, there will undoubtedly be infrastructure projects and possibly a national mega project to stimulate the recovery. Historically, Atlantic Canada tends not to gain our per capita benefits from these projects. Would you be advocating for an Atlantic Canada set aside in such projects so we can benefit from the stimulus as well? Alternatively, would you advocate for regional distribution of incentives in project evaluations?
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously there will be a stimulus package. We're still in the stabilization phase. We're trying to stop the bleeding and make sure that the patient is stabilized. And obviously there will be a stimulus package afterwards. Certain industries will be supported more. We always see usually infrastructure projects, like you were saying, tourism support, etc., which is all good for Atlantic Canada. If you have any ideas, if your members have any ideas in terms of how we should invest in the recovery, please feel free to send them. And we want to make sure also that infrastructure projects are being built. There's different things when thinking about the recovery. First, we need to make sure that we can rehire people quickly. So that's why the wage subsidy is so important, because it keeps the link between employers and employees, and it keeps people having access to their benefits. If they're unserved, they lose their benefits. That's first thing. Second, obviously, we would be thinking at building a greener economy. So that's a priority, and we need to make sure that we support that. And Jenica will love what I'm saying right now. And not only that, I think that we're very much aware that infrastructure projects take time to build. So we need to find other ways also to stimulate the economy. So these are things that we will be working on for sure. And ACOA will be at the center of all of that, through the stabilization, but also in the recovery and the stimulus package.
You mentioned that you'd like to hear from our members if they have ideas on that, and I will tell you that Fredericton is known as the startup capital of Canada.
No, I'm very much aware of that, and I know that's why you have good questions for me regarding the startup sector.
Right. Our businesses are very innovative. Within a week of the state of emergency being declared in New Brunswick, we saw 18 different projects being started by companies in the province, retooling their operations, adapting their research, adapting technologies. So, you know, we do compliment the federal government on the supports that are put in place to help coordinate these responses from industry and from our innovation community. And given that enthusiasm, that creativity, and that collaboration, can you comment on what is the federal government's approach to economic development after the pandemic? We've talked about it a little bit, but we want to know how you'll continue to support innovation as a key driver.
Mm-hmm. Well, through ACOA, we support innovation. Different things. We've had a supercluster approach for Atlantic Canada, so that was one of the first things we did to help the development of an ocean supercluster. And then following that, we also invested massively in supporting development of different tech companies. We also supported women entrepreneurship programs to make sure there were more women in tech, and that was done a lot through the support of incubators, including one in Fredericton, and that was done through ACOA. Now, the idea is to make sure that we can learn from this crisis and be even better afterwards. And definitely, you know, just us right now having this conversation through Zoom and seeing us and having this conversation shows the importance of technology. And I think that many businesses, many governments will see that as something that can be even more accessible after the crisis. So definitely different technology-based solutions will be something that we will want to support. And knowing also that the infrastructure, how can I say, the internet infrastructure is not perfect across the country. It is not perfect in New Brunswick neither. So we need to make sure also that we continue investments to have a stronger system across the board in New Brunswick and across the country.
Thank you. We will remember this conversation and the support that you've promised, and our innovative.
I'm ready.
Our innovative companies will definitely be in touch. One question that is on the minds of, I think, every business across the country right now is that we're about 2 weeks away from paying rent again. It's one of the biggest issues that our members are concerned about. The cost of rent or the cost of their facility is probably second only to labor in terms of their largest expenses. And yesterday, Prime Minister Trudeau stated that help was coming for commercial renters that have been the hardest hit. Can you tell us about that? What assistance is coming? When will it be available? Because again, our members are finding this one of their biggest stress points right now.
And I hear them because I've been an entrepreneur in the past. My spouse is a small business owner, and I see him struggle, try to make sure that, you know, he can go after and go after his receivable and try to pay his, you know, his suppliers, and paying rent is certainly something that is top of mind. So the idea is definitely to reduce the burn rate of companies. And when I say that, that's why we move from having a liquidity approach only to a subsidy approach for salaries and wages. And so, yes, the Prime Minister has said that yesterday, and we're looking at different ways to achieve that. And we're very much aware that in 2 weeks there will be another crunch date, and that's a time limit that we very much have in mind. So when I'll have more to say about that, I'll be able to provide you the information, Kristen, that way. You can make sure to send it to your members. Meanwhile, lots of provinces have stepped up to support more fixed costs, from the different territories to Quebec to PEI and Nova Scotia. They've put in place some programs to support rent payments. I hope New Brunswick will do that also, because even though if the federal government goes ahead, like the Prime Minister of course mentioned, it would be great to have a provincial incentive as well.
Well, don't worry, we're asking that same question to the province pretty much on a daily basis. Yesterday, the Fredericton, St. John, and Moncton Chambers sent a joint letter with regards to that issue, and it is not the first letter we've sent. So we're on the same page there, but we are looking to support our members, and we're looking for that help for our members from every level of government.
Yeah, which makes sense.
We appreciate that.
You do your job. That's perfect.
The next question is, many companies in the tourism and hospitality industry already operate on very thin margins. While the currently announced federal programs, when they have access to them, will help alleviate short-term issues of cash flow and lack of business, government loans may be pushing the problem further down the road. I like to say they're kicking the can down the road. How does the government plan to address the issue of the significant debt load these companies will be forced to take on to survive when it comes due, when these loans come due in 2021 and subsequent years? What kind of a program for debt relief could be utilized just to help people get through that debt? Otherwise, I think we're going to see closures and bankruptcies that will be almost unavoidable going forward.
Yeah, and I hear you. I think we have to do the right policy, take the right decisions to address and, well, to save Main Street, quite frankly. We're having good conversations within the cabinet about that, how to make sure that we can help businesses go through this crisis. And definitely, Krista, we were talking about fixed cost issues beforehand. If we're able to deal that right now through wage subsidies and through other types of fixed cost relief, well, the indebtedness will go down. And so that's why I think a lot of the measures we're taking now will help the recovery. And it's not, we're not putting a band-aid on some, but providing real tools to make sure that businesses will be able to survive, and that we limit the personal guarantees that businesses need to give to banks to have access to liquidity, because that's something else that we're looking at. How can we make sure that we protect people's from personal bankruptcies?
Mm-hmm. The next question that we had was, we've had a number of members come to us stating that they don't qualify for the 75% federal wage subsidy. And because they're still operating their business, they're not being approved for CERB, even though they're making no income from the business operation. Is there any relief for people in this particular predicament?
Well, the relief would be to be able to understand why they don't have access to the wage subsidy. And my take on is that maybe they're not able to, they're not able to show 30% of loss. And if that's not the case, it's maybe because they're seasonal businesses. Mm-hmm. And they're the way you count the 30% is not necessarily available to them yet. Now, two things on this. First, they can use two types of accounting to measure whether if you've incurred 30% of loss. It's either cash accounting or accrual accounting. So if you're in the hotel sector,
you're cutting out there. I think we've lost the minister momentarily. I'm sure she'll be right back. In the meantime, I've come nearly to the end of the questions that have been pre-submitted. I think I have one left. So I'm going to be scrolling through the chat, looking for other questions that have been put there. And the minister is not back as of yet. And now she appears to be gone. Is she gone? All right, so I think what we will do at this point, we have lost the minister from our call, unfortunately, um, unless I'm not seeing her and she is there somewhere. All right, I think what we'll do at this point is we're going to gather the rest of the questions that are in the chat, and we will be submitting them to the minister and to her department for hopefully getting a response. We're now at 11:15, and at this point, I'm going to thank the minister, although she's not here to hear us. We appreciate her input and her insight today. This call has been recorded, and we will be posting it for our members who were not able to join us on the call. And for your benefit, if there was a question or an answer that you didn't catch all the details, you can refer back to it. And we very much appreciate you joining us today. Thank you to the chambers from across the province and to the Atlantic Chamber for joining our call. And to our MP, Jenica, we appreciate it. And of course, Renee Arsenault, thank you for joining the call. And also a number of people from ACOA as well. So, oh, I'm just getting a message that she is going to rejoin the call. And she should be back to us in 2 or 3 minutes. Ah, she's back. Here she is.
There was a small issue that occurred. Okay, good. Sorry about that. I'm here.
Well, I will just give you a little update. What I mentioned to our guests is that we are going to collect any questions in the chat that we are not do not have time to go through.
Yeah.
We'll collect those up and submit them, and hopefully get some response from the department or from your office.
Yeah.
But in the meantime,
Sorry for that. Sorry about that, folks.
no problem at all. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming back. I thought we were done. I was thanking everybody for coming, so I'm very happy you came back. I have another question that was submitted in advance. Last week, the Prime Minister announced Canada's Summer Jobs Program would be expanded and reopened. When can we expect that process to restart? Will those employers that had previously submitted applications have to submit them again? And what about employers that had not applied? Will they be eligible?
So this is a process that is dealt at the MP level. So Jenica would be the one being able to answer questions in Fredericton, and she would be able to have conversations with the ones that, with the employers that had been identified, and also the few employers that may want to have access to these students articling. And so I think that's the best way to work with Jenica. We can provide you more information. What we've announced is that rather than paying, you know, a portion of salaries, we would be paying 100% of, you know, student jobs program. And so that's good news. Now, we're very much aware that certain jobs are not offered because they're non-essential right now. And so that's why we wanted to retool this Canada Student Jobs program to make sure it would be much more linked to the reality and support the efforts of frontline workers in the context of COVID-19.
I'm going to switch over to questions from the chat now.
Yeah.
One question is, how long will the 75% wage subsidy be in place? Because our business cannot open now because the government has designated it non-essential.
Well, okay, a couple of things about that. You can rehire people even though the business is not essential. And therefore, you can pay them up to 75% of $58,700. And you do your best to cover, you know, potentially the 25%. So lots of business that are not necessarily, you know, essential right now are doing that across the country. So that's the first point. Second is, for now, it is for 3 months. So it's covering March, April, and May. Now, should the pandemic continue after May, well, the government will adapt. So that's what I have to say about that.
Okay.
That's what we've done. We started with a wage subsidy that was 10% and we ended up at 75%. So we've been moving very quickly.
I guess the next question is related to that. And it's basically saying the long-term effects on our business, low volume, high value products, and our sales timelines are 6 to 8 months. So we'll see the effect of this in 6 months. Will there be supports available in the aftermath of the lockdown?
I know some businesses have talked to me about that, particularly ones in the construction sector or businesses that usually do their sales right now. And I know that some provinces have moved their essential services based on that reality. For example, recently Ontario and Quebec has said that, residential construction could start again, and just to try to ease a bit of some business realities. That being said, I think this is a conversation, Krista, we should be continue having, because the measures right now are for businesses that are incurring losses as of now. And so if that becomes a problem eventually, I would love to know. And therefore, if we could keep close contact and to address that issue, I think it would be helpful for you and for us.
We will keep very close contact, and I thank you for that offer. An example of a business who is going to be affected in the longer term are businesses who sell such things as group insurance or those types of things where their commissions are for renewals. And so they're going to see a hit from this in 12 months and again in 24 months. They're not showing reductions in revenue right now. But at the same time, they recognize what's going to happen. I mean, it's even that way for chambers of commerce who have annual dues. Our revenues are going to switch up in January, and that's when we'll probably see the hit, not to mention our events. But there are many businesses who have a longer sales cycle, and the impacts are not going to be immediate, but yet they're going to have to deal with that in the longer term.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so I'll try to divide your comment into, so the Chamber of Commerce example, what we said for non-for-profits, if you're able to show that you've had decrease in 30% in fundraising, putting aside the government funding you can get, you'd be receiving, then you have access to the wage subsidy. So that's something that the Chamber of Commerce could be looking into to keep its employees. And quite frankly, your work and your organization has never been so important for your members and for the government, because more you're organized, more we can hear what are the interests of your members, better we can react and be nimble about it. So that's my first point. Regarding the fact that other groups may see impacts, well, let's make sure that we're aware and we'll address these issues as they come. But right now, what we wanted to do was to go as quick as possible, knowing that we would be covering 80% of the cases. And we are now dealing with the 20% of cases that haven't been dealt with. Some of which we hope there will be changes in the coming days and weeks to our different measures, potentially more measures. Definitely support, things can be dealt through ACOA. And maybe if things are, longer in time, well, we'll deal with them as we are dealing with the impacts of this pandemic on the economy. That's what I can tell you at this point.
I see so many questions in the chat, and we just can't get to them all, but we are going to submit them. And folks, if you're on the call and you've submitted a question and we haven't gotten to it, we will do that. We will submit those questions and get the answers. I was asked to tie up the call now. And I just want to say another thank you to you for taking this call. It's not easy to get on the hot seat and answer questions like this, and we very much appreciate your willingness to do so. I know you have done this in chamber, and you have other calls with chambers across the country, but particularly here in Atlantic Canada, because you are the minister responsible for ACOA. This is important to us. And I certainly know that our members have a lot of interest in what's happening with ACOA and whatnot. So hopefully we can perhaps organize another conversation of this nature specific to ACOA clientele. And
I would love that, Krista. I think it's worth it in the coming days and weeks to redo this while we announce potentially other measures, and that to see how it lands and basically get feedback from people. I know that ACOA is extremely important to Atlantic Canada people. You can hear from my accent that I'm not from Atlantic Canada, but I am supported by great MPs across Atlantic Canada, and definitely Francis McGuire, who lives in Fredericton, is a good president of ACOA, and we're in close touch, and basically we help each other a lot. And my mentor, Frank McKenna, is never far away. So I text him pretty much every 2-3 days. Now, what I wanted to tell to your members is, I know these are very anxious times. I know that these are really, really stressful times. And the economy is based on, direct inputs, such as, sales and the demand and supply and inventories. And that's how financial markets work. But how financial markets work also is based on consumer confidence. And 2/3 of our markets are based on emotions. More we're able to be confident about the future, about the fact that the pandemic will stop and that there's light at the end of the tunnel, better. We will be off afterwards. And so my role is to help you cross the bridge and to make sure that we can meet all together on the other side of the shore. And so please keep it up. It will go and it will get better, and we're there to help. And definitely by working with Krista, we can provide you the information in order for you to take good and sound business decisions.
Thank you so much. And we're going to be relying on your help. We appreciate everything that you have been doing thus far. We recognize that the government has been very nimble and introduced programs at much faster speed than have been able to do in the past, and we appreciate that both at the federal, provincial, and municipal level. So we appreciate that. I do want to throw out there, you said that from the sound of your voice, we know that you're not from Atlantic Canada, but you sound exactly like many of our neighbors right here in New Brunswick, officially bilingual province of the country. So
I know that.
New Brunswicker. So
I don't have an Acadian accent, I have a Quebecois accent, that's why.
There you go. So thanks very much for your time today. Yeah. And we are going to take advantage of all your offers of help going forward, and doing calls again and setting up conversations with ACOA and answering our questions. So you made a number of offers, and we're going to take advantage of all of them. So thank you. And thank you, all of our members, MP Jenica Atwin. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And we'll sign off for now. And this will be recorded and posted. So thanks very much.